Madam, it will really be a privilege to know that India would really be the first country in the world to set up such an extensive network of specialized environment courts. I can say this with all the emphasis at my command that no country in the world has the type of framework that we are proposing to put in place through the National Green Tribunal. What will the National Green Tribunal do? It would empower the ordinary citizen of India to ensure that the laws relating to environment and forests are implemented for his or her own benefit. If I remember aright, in the earlier government, we had the Right to Information and the Right to Employment Acts. Subsequently, we had the Right to Education Act. Now, this will be the Right to Environment Act. Of course, we will have the right to food security later, but when the National Green Tribunal becomes a law, it will guarantee to every citizen of India the right to a safe and clean environment. There are 7 major laws in the country that relate to environment and forests, 2 relating to water pollution, 1 relating to air pollution. The main are the Environment Protection Act, the Forest Conservation Act, the Biological Diversity Act, and so on. What do they do? Any citizen of India, either directly or indirectly, can approach the National Green Tribunal for civil damages. We have defined in the law what is meant by a substantial question of the environment. If anybody is aggrieved, if anybody is adversely affected by the non-implementation of laws relating to environment and forests, he or she can approach the National Green Tribunal for civil damages. This is a major historic step forward in our country. Madam, the first historic step that was taken in the field of environment was the Forest Conservation Act of 1980 under the leadership of late Shrimati Indira Gandhi. Then we had the unfortunate Bhopal gas tragedy of 1984, which led to Parliament enacting the Environment Protection Act. 24 years later, Parliament has enacted a third historic legislation, which is the National Green Tribunal legislation. What the National Green Tribunal will be? There will be one main bench and there will be 4 other benches. So there will be 5 benches of the National Green Tribunal in different parts of the country. They will have up to 20 judicial members. They will have experts relating to environment as its members. They will function in a circuit mode so that access to justice will be easy and convenient for all citizens of the country. The idea is to put pressure on the central government and the state government to ensure that the laws of the land that relate to environment and forests are implemented in letter and spirit. If they are not implemented in the wisdom of the tribunal, civil damages can be claimed by the aggrieved citizens. For example, today environment is beginning to have public health impact in many parts of the country. So many types of diseases are on the increase. In many parts of India, the incidence of cancer has come into the force and experts believe that this is because of pollution. This is because of the manner in which the environment has been spoiled. Citizens living in these areas can approach the National Green Tribunal and claim civil damages for hurt that has been caused to them by the non-implementation of laws relating to environment and forests. Madam, this bill was brought in 2009. The Standing Committee gave its report in that year itself. Today we are discussing the bill in the Lok Sabha. I think the manner and the speed with which we have moved demonstrates our commitment, demonstrates our determination to ensure that the laws are implemented. The Standing Committee had made 12 recommendations. We have accepted 10 recommendations. Only 2 recommendations have not been accepted. One is about giving the power of contempt to the tribunal. It is too early to give that type of powers to the tribunal. Perhaps we could consider it at a large stage. The second recommendation which we have not accepted is relating to the schedule which will form part of the National Green Tribunal. However, I assure all the honorable members that before we delete any law or before we add any law, we will place a draft notification on the table of the Parliament, and only after the Parliament finally approves that notification, we will add or subtract that from the laws which will be under the purview of the National Green Tribunal. Sir, I would like to state here that more than 20 honorable members have presented their views. Broadly, the idea of having a National Green Tribunal has been supported. There have been some criticisms in respect of many of the provisions of the bill, which I will respond to as quickly as possible. Before I respond to the criticisms, I would like to mention that the National Green Tribunal Bill is one element of a revised and a reformed or a restructured approach to environment governance. On the one side, we need an effective environmental protection authority that actually monitors compliance and ensures implementations of laws, and on the other side, we have the National Green Tribunal Bill, which deals with the civil dimensions of implementation of these laws. So, the National Green Tribunal Bill is not as answer to the problems of environment and forest. It provides me an opportunity for people to claim civil damages arising out of the non-implementation or the wrong implementation of the laws relating to environment and forest. So we should not see this in isolation. In the monsoon session of Parliament, I hope to bring forward a legislation to establish a national Environmental Protection Authority. The National Environmental Protection Authority will be charged with the responsibility of ensuring proper implementation of the laws relating to environment and forest. Honorable Chairman Sir, I thank you for giving me the opportunity. The Honorable Railway Minister is seeking the approval of this House for a sum of rupees 60,000 crore through the appropriation bill. Sir, the financial health of the railways is not very sound. The Honorable Minister herself in her budget speech had confessed that she was facing resource constraint. It is true that the railways are facing financial constraints. This is because nobody knows whether the railways are a commercial organization or whether it is a government department. For some reasons, it considers itself as a government department. For certain other reasons, it considers itself as a commercial organization. They are neither here nor there. With the result, the entire financial structure of the railways is a confused structure. The railways is still part of the Consolidated Fund of India for its receipts and expenditure. It also produces a balance sheet. No government department produces balance sheet while the railways produce it. It draws money from the Consolidated Fund of India. Nobody knows how it should function, what should be the capital structure, and how it should raise the resources. It publishes the balance sheet, but the balance sheet does not reveal anything. Anybody can read a balance sheet, but as we read the balance sheet of any commercial organization, there are certain disclosure norms so that the public at large would understand that the disclosures are properly done. But there is nothing which the balance sheet of the railways shows. It is a non-corporate balance sheet. There are no guidelines in it as per the expected practice of a commercial organization. The capital and revenue side are not segregated. The loans are not segregated. The depreciation methodology is not proper. It is done on an ad hoc basis. The list of assets is not disclosed. When the entire structure of accounting itself is wrong, how can the Parliament approve this appropriation sum? What is it that you are offering to Parliament to understand and then to sanction and approve the appropriation? We only ask some railways lines or certain facilities, but there is no discussion as to how the resources are to be mobilized, from where they should come, and how we should utilize the scarce resources for the overall development of the railways. Sir, it is a commercial organization but with a substantial social burden on it. The social burden should be segregated and that has to be funded through budgetary support. You cannot put the entire social obligation, which is part of the government's obligation, on a commercial organization. The railway should function as a commercial organization. It should raise its resources as any other commercial organization. If it is undertaking any social obligation to that extent, there should be budgetary support to the railways. The health of the railways is not really good. In 1998 to 1999, when we compare the present year's figures with that of the previous year, the net profit of the railways has gone down drastically. We should know what we are losing. It is an expanding organization. Nobody is able to understand how the railways are functioning. In her budget speech, the Honorable Minister talks about transparency and accountability. Believe me, sir, with this account, there cannot be any transparency and accountability. So, what is required is a thorough, in depth analysis of the account of the railways. What is happening is that the railways are not accountable with regard to the cost escalation. Most of my colleagues were saying that when a project of high value is taken up, the railways are able to provide funds to the extent of 2 or 3%. Then that project is taken up and only the amount that is allocated is spent. Then next year no allocation is made for that project. When you do not make any allocation, whatever you have invested that goes into the drain and there is no productivity. So your account does not reflect the productivity aspect of the whole system. With this type of account structure which is not healthy, you cannot become a viable organization at any point of time. So the profit is reflected here without charging the provident fund liability which they are showing as surplus. This surplus is just a doctored surplus. So I urge upon the railway minister to present their accounts on a commercial pattern and try to change the entire accounting structure. A committee was appointed for capital restructuring and for the entire restructuring of the railways accounts. We do not know what has happened to it. We have been talking about it and the parliament was told several years ago that they were coming out with a restructuring proposal, but nothing has happened so far. The railway minister claims that she is going to achieve transparency and accountability and that is her desire. I do not think that this desire will be fulfilled unless she takes some stringent steps to set right the entire railway account. She should present an account which is readable by any person who wants to study the balance sheet of the railways and offers these suggestions. Sir, coming to the other aspect, I would like to say that they are talking about utilization of the property of the railways to mobilize resources. We have been hearing about this utilization of the railway property for the last 6 years. It is not for the first time that the Honorable Minister has stated this is her budget speech. The earlier minister had also commented on this. I would like to know as to what has happened to this proposal. Who has prepared the project? We have been talking about utilization of commercial property on the lines of those railways in the world which are utilizing their commercial properties. It is a fact that you can follow the same thing.